Hey, Dr. Harris, welcome to the show. How are you today?
I'm great. Thanks.
We are,
Appreciate being on.
well, we're happy to have you. Thank you so much for being here. You are definitely saving a lot of lives out there and optimizing health, which is what we're all about. And so we'd like to welcome you today officially. And so, just so our listeners know, we have Dr. Bill Harris on today, and he's been a leading researcher in the omega-3 field for over 40 years and has over 300 scientific papers on fatty acids and health, hundreds of research papers, and they're all dedicated to omega-3 fatty acids for the most part. Dr. Harris has been ranked among the 2% of all scientists worldwide based on the impact of his research. And he is one of the most well-respected scientists in this field and actually created a measurement tool, which I've used, called OmegaQuant. It's an omega-3 index, and it's a measurement of the EPA and DHA, which are omega-3s, present in the membranes of your red blood cells. So you'll find out why this is so critical to your health. So welcome, Dr. Bill.
Thank you, Lori.
I know you have a long, nice bio. I know you do. And we could probably spend a whole podcast on that. But in the meantime,
no point in that.
Can you tell us why omega-3 in my question to you, I used marine sources, but maybe it's good that we go into the different types of omega-3. I mean, I know it's just, there's just a couple types. So there's marine and
right. And
plant-based.
that's a great place to start. It's a source of confusion, I think, a lot of times.
Right.
Yeah, there are two, I guess you call them almost subfamilies. If you call the omega-3 a family of fatty acids, the omega-6 is a family, the omega-3 is a family. The subfamily in the omega-3 world is the plant-based and the marine or fish-based fish-derived omega-3s. And the one that comes from plants is what we call alpha linolenic acid. So we just say ALA. It's easier. From a chemical point of view, it's a 18 carbon fatty acid, a chain of carbon atoms, 18 carbons long, compared to the marine omega-3s, which are 20 or 22 carbons long. So they're different molecules completely. Yeah. There is some conversion of the plant-based ALA to at least EPA in the body. Not
if you're
a lot.
Lucky.
If you're lucky. Yeah. It's just still a matter of controversy exactly how much ALA gets converted to EPA and DHA, and if that's enough to have a health impact. I would not bet on it being enough, because it's just, we know that taking already formed EPA and DHA from eating fish or supplements raises the omega-3 index much better than taking ALA. So that's the place to start. There's two kinds, and we like the marine based or the fish based omega-3s best.
Yeah, that's the one that really yields a lot of benefit as well. Yeah.
So, Doc, to that point, how did you fall into this and got such a deep knowledge of it, and what really piqued your interest in omegas?
I was told to get interested in omegas when I was just after I finished my Ph.D. I went and did what's called a post-doctoral fellowship. It's kind of like a residency in medicine, where you start to develop your own research legs. And my boss at the time, named Dr. Bill Connor out in Portland, Oregon, this is the late 70s. He was interested, had been for a long time, in the effects of different kinds of dietary fats on cholesterol levels. That was all kind of the rage in the 70s. What kind of fats raise cholesterol or lower cholesterol? And he was kind of not curious about fish oils. And he was curious about fish oils because we didn't really know why vegetable oils, these liquid vegetable oils, corn oil, soybean oil, etc., were well known at that time to lower cholesterol levels if you eat them. and animal fats, which are hard fats, saturated fats, solid at room temperature, Crisco, butter, think about things like that. Those kind of fats we knew raised cholesterol, but we didn't really know if it was the fact that it was a plant-based oil, a plant-based product, or an animal-based product that was causing the effect, or was it just the fact that one was liquid and one was solid at room temperature. And fish oil was kind of an intermediate, because fish is from an animal, but it's liquid and at room temperature. And so he told me to design a study and carry it out in humans in a metabolic ward feeding setting, where we had and said, let's test these three oils. I mean, a fish oil, a vegetable oil, and a saturated fat. And so that's what I did. And that's why I learned about omega-3 about the same time that the Eskimo studies were coming out of Greenland from the Danish investigators, showing that higher omega-3 was cardioprotective. I didn't really know that until, I was well into my research in this particular study. And so it turned out to be the right place at the right time.
Wow, that's really an impressive story, because little did you know the impact you'd have on the world, later down the road. So I guess it's important to note what the benefits, because that's pretty much what we're talking about. We will be going into today a little bit, the benefits of a balance, let's say, of omega-3, omega-6. And I know that they're pro-resolving, the omega-3s are. And I mean, there's a whole litany of things we could talk about in that one sentence, but yeah, I guess maybe just the benefits of having a balance of omega-3 and 6.
Yeah, and when I think about balance, we often talk about omega-6 and omega-3 as the balance to get. And to me, the way to achieve the right balance is not to worry so much about the omega-6s. Our problem in America and in the West is the lack of omega-3.
Right.
And so if you want to fix your balance, the way to do it is eat more omega-3. And so what do they do? Yeah, that's a good question. Why do we care? The first thing we figured out that they do back in the early 80s was they will lower one of the major blood lipid components called triglycerides. When there's cholesterol in your blood, everybody knows about cholesterol. Triglyceride is a slightly less well-known lipid that circulates in your blood along with cholesterol, and it's also related to risk for coronary disease. High triglycerides are, but not as clearly as cholesterol is. So that was the first thing we saw that the omega-3s did. They really effectively lowered triglycerides. And then we found out pretty much the same time, they also made the platelets, the little cells in your blood that stick together when you have a cut. And they start the process of stopping the bleeding, called hemostasis.
Or clotting.
So the clotting factors, right. And so you found the omega-3s actually sort of thinned the blood, made the blood less likely to clot, made the platelets less active. And so those two pieces together were the first hints we had as to why they might lower risk for heart disease, which is kind of what the Eskimo experiments were showing. And so those two things still are reasons why omega-3s are beneficial. Plus, we now know they also can contribute to lower blood pressure. And then the big elephant in the room you alluded to, Lori, was the anti-inflammatory effects. And those are far and wide, and probably the most important component of the most explanatory piece of what omega-3s do, just chronically lower inflammation in the body.
And that should be underscored, because really we know that this type of inflammation or chronic inflammation is the core cause of most, it's an underlying cause really of most illness, disease, faster aging, and even weight gain, obesity.
Oh, yeah. I wish I could say that omega-3s will cause you to lose weight. We've done enough studies over the last 40 years giving people omega-3 fish oil supplements. That's one thing I can't say that they do. They don't cause weight loss. They don't cause weight gain either.
Do they balance blood sugar?
They do help improve, well, let me say this. They reduce risk for higher omega-3 levels are associated with lower risk for developing diabetes.
Okay.
Yes.
There's a potential way.
There's a potential way. You know, there are early studies. The question, what do they do to blood sugar levels per se?
Right.
There were some early studies with pretty high doses of omega-3, 6 to 8 grams a day, that made blood sugar worse. And so people were, oh no, what's going on?
Yeah.
But nowadays, more reasonable doses, 3-4 grams a day, which are still pretty high doses in a way, do not adversely affect blood sugar. And if you look in the long run at people who have higher omega-3 levels in their blood, either because they're eating more fish or because they're just metabolically tuned that way, or they're taking supplements, they clearly have lower risk for diabetes and for heart disease.
So
and for dying from anything. I mean, that's the other thing.
Yeah,
total mortality.
That's incredible. I know that right there. Yeah.
So, Doc, my question is, because it always comes up about the balance, like you alluded to earlier, between the omega-6s and 3s. What is it about, say, the American diet that we're so deficient in omega-3?
We don't eat fish.
That's simple.
I mean, it's pretty simple. This is not rocket science.
I love it.
we have no taste for fish. I mean, you look at cultures, Norwegians, or more specifically Koreans or Japanese, where fish is just part of almost every meal, if at least every day. And they have much higher omega-3 levels, and the Japanese and the Koreans particularly are a much lower risk for heart disease. And they also live longer, which fits with the whole longevity story on omega-3. So that's why Americans don't have high enough omega-3s. They don't eat it.
So, Doc, to follow up on that, right? Are we just fearful of like the mercury and all the horror stories that they talk about fish intake? Is that something that's happening now? Because I kind of feel like this is kind of new, because we've never had this imbalance, it seems, historically before, unless, correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, right. I mean, there is a story that you hear that if you go back 120 or 130 years, the balance of omega-3 and omega-6 was very different, but it wasn't because we were eating more fish. It's because seed oils had not been refined and were not sold in bottles in grocery stores. Corn oil, vegetable oils. So there was more omega-6 in the diet. The question is, was that really a problem? Or was it simply the lack of, I mean, it's a long story to deal with, and to try and guess, for example, what Paleolithic ancestors were eating, and who died by the time they were 30 anyway. They never got time to develop some of these diseases, so we don't know what they were eating. We don't know what they died of. I think the fact is, we've just, in America, at least, I mean, I grew up in the Midwest. We never ate. Well, we ate tuna. Okay, we had canned tuna.
That was about it for me too. Yeah.
Midwest. And then Mrs. Paul's fish sticks, right? And,
right.
There's just not much omega-3 floating in this way, and it's just. Again, I don't think it's the problem is really not the presence of omega-6. I think the problem is the lack of omega-3.
That's an interesting point you brought up. I was going to ask you about later, which is how you feel about the omega-6 issue, the seed oils, and the junk food. I know you're not a fan of junk food, but how these oils can maybe have an effect on our health.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of been popular to really demonize, if not omega-6, at least seed oils.
That's where I've had a problem, with people demonizing omega-6 when we clearly know it's an essential fat.
Yes, right? And we do. And some of the data that we've been generated over the last few years, a couple studies in particular, we're part of a large consortium of of studies that look at blood levels of omega-3, omega-6, for example, and in thousands of patients, and then track these people over time to see what kind of diseases they develop. And so in the omega-3 side, we published studies looking at people with the high omega-3 levels. If you follow them for 15, 20 years, are less likely to die. They're less likely to have heart disease. They're less likely to have diabetes. They're less likely to get dementia. Okay. Those are all observational studies, we call them. But we're observing what happens to people who have chronically higher levels of omega-3 than lower. And so we asked the same question of omega-6. So, well, our blood analysis has omega-6 levels too, so we can ask the same question, and we find that for higher levels of linoleic acid, linoleic is the name of the principal omega-6 fatty acid in our diet and in our blood, and it's a kind of a mirror image of one of the omega-3s, the ALA. And so we found in our studies that people that had the highest percentiles of omega-6 levels were significantly less likely to develop heart disease, significantly less likely to develop diabetes. Not more likely, less likely. Which
that's unbelievable.
To me says, well, wait a minute now. We shouldn't be vilifying these omega-6 fatty acids. I mean, maybe there's something wrong with seed oils and the other kinds of processed foods that you eat them in. That could be a problem, but it doesn't mean that omega-6s are a problem.
I know.
So it's tough to dice this out, I think, for people.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I've had people on social media say, well, if I'm talking about nuts or seeds or whatever,
sure,
they're like, no, you shouldn't eat those. Too much omega-6 in your diet's bad for you. And
yeah, I know.
I always have to clarify for them the truth,
Yeah, right. And it's very hard to do the kind of randomized, placebo-controlled studies that you do for drugs, that the medical profession has done with drugs for years to find out the effects of the drug on whatever health outcome you're looking at. It's hard to do that with nutrition.
It is. Absolutely. It's a really good
because
point.
It just takes too many years. I mean, nutrition is a lifelong story, and it's not just take people when they're 65 and already got high risk factors for heart disease and put them on fish oil for a couple of years and expect to turn that ship around.
Or they've had a lifetime of crappy eating, quote unquote.
Right. And you're not going to reverse that. If we could do a study where we started people in their teens on high dose omega-3, and we had another group that was on placebo for 40 years, okay, we could, that'd be great. We'd really see some stuff, but it's unethical and it's impractical and it's too expensive. It's not going to be
right.
done.
So, Doc, one of the questions I know comes up a lot because they're obviously, like you said, we don't necessarily have the desire to eat that much fish in our diets, unfortunately. Like supplementation obviously comes into play. Can you just talk about how much supplementation you think is necessary on a weekly or a daily basis?
Yeah, sure. I think just to preface that, let's talk about the omega-3 index, the blood test that we developed almost 20 years.
OmegaQuant. Yeah.
OmegaQuant's the name of the company.
Okay.
The blood test is called the omega-3 index.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that is, as you said, Lori, it's the amount of EPA and DHA in red blood cell membranes. And that's the way we measure it. It's expressed as a percent. So if 5% of the fatty acids in your membrane are EPA, DHA, your omega-3 index is 5%. We think a healthy level is up over 8%, which doesn't sound like a big jump, but it is. Probably less than 5% of Americans have a omega-3 index over 8%. It's unusual. Whereas in Japan, that's sort of the average.
Yeah, the I took your test, by the way, and mine was
Uh-huh.
at 12%, believe it or
Atta
not.
girl.
Yay. I was happy to see that. Yeah.
I think that's higher than me. I'm running around 10, I think.
Mhm.
So your question, Omar, is how much do you need to take? And so the question we've asked in the past is, well, how much omega-3 does it take to get you from a sort of typical American 4 or 5% omega-3 index up to 8%?
Mhm.
And that turns out to be in the neighborhood of 1,500 milligrams a day of EPA DHA. It'll vary, obviously, person to person, but that's the on average.
Mhm.
So 1,500 milligrams a day, that's, if you want to eat a salmon steak every day, that would give you that. So it's doable with nutrition.
Mhm.
You don't have to supplement. Um, but most people don't do that.
Right.
A can of sardines a day would do that. But how many people are going to do that?
And even I think it must be mentioned too that some of the fish oil companies aren't providing an adequate amount to see a result.
You mean some of the supplements?
Yeah, that there's not enough. There's just like there are some supplements that are giving you, say, 2 grams, but some just don't provide enough. And people are taking maybe one of those of the dosage, for example. Say a dosage is
Right.
2.
Right. You really gotta be smart when you look at the label to see how
Mm-hmm.
many milligrams per capsule,
Mm-hmm.
or just, it'll often list it per serving. And then you got to figure out what is the serving. And if it's 4 capsules, well, then that's what you got to deal with. But you're right. Some capsules are the cheaper ones are lower concentration, lower
Right.
amount of EPA and DHA per capsule, which makes sense because it's expensive to concentrate this stuff. So yeah, the consumer just needs to be aware. And fortunately or unfortunately, there's so many omega-3 brands out there. It's bewildering.
It is
Mhm.
bewildering. I mean, it's everywhere. And, the cheaper brands that you find like at Walgreens or something, or any
Yeah.
drugstore, I should say, are, they're in clear capsules. They should be in dark capsules to prevent the oxidation. I mean, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure you know all about that, um, but for
Yeah.
those that are looking for a good omega fish oil, it should be purified, third party tested. There's
Right. And
guaranteed.
should try to get there's 2 different forms typically, right? There's chemical forms, there's
Yeah.
a triglyceride form and ethyl ester form. And the ethyl esters are what all the omega-3 drugs are.
Mm-hmm.
That's the form. And those were sort of invented years ago because they were a way to get more omega-3 in a 1 gram capsule. So now it's 80% of the oil in that pill is omega-3, 85%. That was very hard to do in a triglyceride form which is a more natural form, more readily absorbed form. Until several years ago, the industry figured out a way to make a triglyceride form as highly concentrated in omega-3 as the ethyl ester forms are. So we recommend the triglyceride form because it's simply just more readily absorbed in the intestines.
So,
Excellent.
so Doc, not to beat the dead horse, brought it up earlier, but like I hear it a lot, and the concern is like the mercury. Does this have
Well,
anything to do with both the fish and the supplementation?
yeah. So mercury. Let's just dispose of supplementation right now because the mercury is a water soluble chemical that goes in when you grind up these fish to get the oils. The protein and water part gets separated from the oil part. Oil floats to the top. It has no mercury in it. It's not the capsules are not a source of mercury. The sources of mercury are 4 or 5 different specific fish, and only one of them really is fairly high in omega-3, and that's the albacore tuna, which is the white tuna, and that's even on the low end of mercury levels. The big ones are shark, swordfish, tilefish, and king mackerel.
Mm-hmm.
So, people don't eat much of that stuff.
No.
Those are the ones that really accumulate higher amounts of mercury. But I mean, even that, the mercury, we published a paper looking at the relationship between fish intake and IQ in children, and including mercury intake. And if you look at all the studies together, regardless of mercury levels, and sometimes higher mercury levels associated with higher IQ, because the higher mercury level is a marker of more fish intake.
Oh, interesting.
So you'll see all around the world that what our group was trying to do was trying to show that women need to be not afraid of eating fish when they're pregnant. There's a cost to not eating it.
Right.
A bigger cost to not eating it than there is to eating it. And don't worry about the mercury. I mean, again, there's 4 species that pregnant women should avoid or shouldn't eat often. And I listed them. They're species that hardly anybody eats anyway. But the sardines, salmon is great. Virtually no mercury in salmon.
Mm-hmm.
So people get so scared about the mercury, and it's really detrimental to them, because they're staying away from a very important nutrient for their babies.
Yeah, especially when it's growing, like, the brain is forming. It's particularly important. Yeah.
Exactly.
That's so important. You said that. Also, you say that our omega-3 index is better than a cholesterol test, better than a triglyceride test, in terms of a marker, right?
I believe so. And why do we measure cholesterol? We measure cholesterol and triglycerides because we want to know if it's high, that puts us at higher risk for heart disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a biomarker of risk, or what's called a risk factor. Well, a low omega-3 index is a risk factor. It is it's something you measure in the blood that tells you something about your future risk for developing a disease, just like cholesterol or blood glucose, if you're talking about diabetes. And when we've compared head to head the serum cholesterol level as a predictor of risk for total mortality, death from anything.
Mm-hmm.
And we compared the omega-3 index on the same scale, and we found that the cholesterol level didn't predict at all who was going to die over the next 15 years. Whereas the omega-3 index was a strong predictor. If you had a high omega-3 index, you were really low risk of dying. But cholesterol was not a predictor. So that's why I say that the omega-3 index is a better predictor of at least those health outcomes. And I'm sure when we look at other health outcomes, like the risk of dementia, things like that, it's going to be true too, that there are very few things you can measure in your blood that will predict your risk for those kind of outcomes. And omega-3 is one of them. You should do it.
That's really interesting. I know you opened up a can of worms with this cholesterol business. So do we, I don't want to say ignore the cholesterol readings, but do we just continuously supplement or eat extra fish to maybe combat those numbers that come up on a cholesterol panel?
Yeah, I mean, to your first point, correct. We should not, I'm not saying that you should not measure your cholesterol level or be aware of it or try to optimize it. Your doctor's going to want to do that. That's just what we've been doing for 50 years. And that's not bad. I'm just saying that if you care about your cholesterol level, you ought to also care about your omega-3 level.
Right. Your optimal health. Yeah.
Doctor. And so don't just do the one, do both of them. And the omega-3 I mean, will it help reduce risk for people who have higher blood cholesterol levels? Yes, it will. Does it mean that you should ignore your cholesterol levels and just work on omega-3? No, that's silly. You do everything you can
Mm-hmm.
to reduce your risk. It's just that up to this point, people haven't really realized that omega-3 can be protective. And we need to
Extremely
get that
so.
message out there.
Yeah.
Got it.
Um, so I thought it was fascinating, your paper, the Framingham paper regarding smoking. And it was stunning, that what came out. And if you could just expand on that just a little bit.
Yeah, so that was an interesting. I thought it was studying too. So we kind of we're asking that question. We had done the analysis in Framingham. We measured, and a Framingham, of course, is a longitudinal study of a population just outside of Boston, a town called Framingham. And we measured their omega-3 levels like 15 years ago now, and we now seeing who is dying of anything, total mortality, death from any cause. And we find that people that have the highest omega-3 levels are least likely to die over that 15-year period of time. So we're trying to get some handle on, well, how do you put that in some kind of context? What do you mean higher omega-3 is better? So we looked at smoking, people who are smoking in Framingham, and asked what's their risk for dying over that 15-year period of time. Well, turns out that if you're in the best case scenario, you're not smoker, you're a non-smoker, and you have a high omega-3 level, your risk of dying is like 10% over that 15-year period, say between age 65 and 75. If you're have a low omega-3 level and you are a smoker, then your chances of dying are like 50% over that window of time. And the other two combinations, high omega-3 and a smoker, or a non-smoker and a low omega-3, had kind of an intermediate risk for death. And the point of this is really not to say that, well, take omega-3s and you can keep smoking. Mm-hmm. That's not the point. The point is to give doctors, particularly, a perspective that if you think smoking is important, or non-smoking, more to the point, then you want to also think about optimizing omega-3 levels, because they have kind of the same impact on the bottom line of when you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a little surprised that smoking and omega-3 kind of carried the same weight, or non-smoking in a way.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
That really is. And, interestingly, that ties in just a little bit for me is that the Japanese are smokers in a large part, right? And so they, you said that their omega-3 index is like 8 to 12%, right?
Yeah, at least historically. Yeah, not the young ones, not nowadays, but historically.
So I thought that was very interesting. And they live 5 years longer on average because their omega-3 intake is so much higher than ours.
I mean, I like to think it's because, and that's the right statistic. I like to think it's because the omega-3 is higher. Can't prove it, but you raise a really interesting point, because they live 5 years longer, but they smoke more. They have more stress than we do, and they have more hypertension than we do. High blood pressure from the high salt diet that they eat, and they still live longer. Incredible. And we think it's because the omega-3 is helping prevent that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is fantastic. Yeah. So what is the one thing, what would you say would be the most efficient way for then us to maximize our omega-3? And I'm assuming you're going to say take it.
Well, yes.
Eat it.
Yes,
or
step
take
one,
it.
eat it.
Yeah.
I think we all like to say, diet, food, and whole foods is really the best way to go first. And I agree with that. We should. But then the reality sets in of, well, people aren't going to, the vast majority of Americans are not going to just start eating high omega-3 oily fish, mackerel, herring, sardines. These are pretty fishy fish.
Mm-hmm. That's what Americans don't like. Yeah.
That's what they don't like. And, I know I've talked to other folks in the omega-3 space who's, younger than us, who raised their kids, starting about age 6 months, they'd start giving them sardines.
Wow.
And the kids would like it. I mean, they didn't have any reason not to like it,
Right, right.
They had to learn not to like it. And they very intentionally started introducing a very oily fish early on so that the flavor would not be offensive the way it is to most of us.
Right.
So what's the best way to do it? To your question, yeah, dietary supplements of omega-3, I think, are the most practical way to raise your omega-3 index.
I'm
and
glad you brought
consistency.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, Doc, too, because again, I'm thinking of all the sea creatures that we might eat, including shrimp and scallops and lobsters and crab. So, where do they stand as far as omega-3 content?
Not
That's a
very
good
well.
question. Ah,
Yeah,
Oh,
they're not what we call oily fish.
gotcha. Yeah, yeah. That's
I mean, and, you know, some people think oily would be like, you know, deep fried catfish. Well, that's
that's what the
kind of
omega-6 comes in
that,
with that oil.
that's where the omega comes in, right? But that's not the kind of oily we're talking about. Yeah, there's a lot of seafood that is fairly low in omega-3, and you named some of the most popular ones right there. Tilapia is, I mean, is as bad as a hot dog in terms of omega-3.
yeah. It's
Oh,
There's
wow.
junk
almost no
food,
omega, which is why people like it, because it doesn't taste.
like
It just
fish.
doesn't taste like fish. It tastes like chicken. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, sure, okay, but still, at one point, even eating those kinds of fish is better than maybe the alternative. You know, what else would you be eating? If you're going to be eating a cheeseburger, I'd rather have you eat some tilapia than a cheeseburger, you know,
True.
as
Yeah.
much as I love cheeseburgers. I mean, I must
Right.
admit.
That's funny. But yeah, so before we go, I was going to ask you um how much does the body allow the omega-3 into the cell membrane?
um, well, it welcomes it with open arms, by and large. I mean, how well are they absorbed when you eat
Yeah,
them?
the absorption, the bioavailability.
Yeah, and that kind of alludes back to the for what I said about ethyl ester forms versus the triglyceride form or a
Okay.
phospholipid form. Phospholipid form is what you find in krill oil supplements, which are fine, good source of omega-3 as well. Um, if particularly triglyceride and the phospholipid forms are perfectly well absorbed. There's no problem. Virtually 100% gets absorbed, goes into your bloodstream, distributed to the tissues, and locked up in the membranes of your cells. And so that's not a problem. The ethyl ester forms are okay if you take them at the same time you're eating a meal that's got fat in it, because other fats, because that will stimulate the digestive juices to secrete the fat digesting enzymes, and then they'll do a deal on the ethyl esters and make them absorbable. So you can use ethyl ester forms. It's just that you really need to take them with food, for sure.
One last question. I wanted to ask you about the algae oil for omega-3 for vegans.
Yeah, good. Exactly. And algae, you know, people going, wow, algae, wow. So, right, the original source of omega-3 in the ocean for the fish don't make omega-3 any more than we make omega-3. They have to eat it, and they eat it. Original sources of sunlight transformed into these long chain fatty acids by algae. And I'm not talking about seaweed. I'm talking about little single-celled, you know, one-celled microscopic organisms called microalgae that will actually make the omega-3s, and then that's the base of the marine food chain. And the omega-3s just get consumed by the little critters, and the little bigger critters, and the big fish eat the little fish, and you know how it goes. So algae is the original source. And so some smart people many years ago said, well, let's just start growing the algae and getting the omega-3s straight out of there and forget the fish. And it's a great idea.
Yeah,
it's
really.
been expensive, but as demand grows, and it is growing, and as people become more aware of how difficult it is, how maybe we can't get all the omega-3s we need just by killing fish. We just can't do it. We have to get another source. And so there are not only there are supplements that are from vegan or for vegans that are for anybody. I mean, but vegans who don't want to eat anything from an animal can use the algal DHA and algal EPA. But there are many companies working on actually land plants, even soybean,
Really?
genetically modifying soybean, genetically modifying a variety of plants that just grow out of the dirt, so that they produce EPA and DHA.
Oh, interesting.
Now we're going to have to kind of get over our GMO phobias to accept that, which I hope we do someday, because we can't just be afraid of GMO just because of those three letters. There has to be some rationale behind it, but that's the ultimate source forever. We could stop harvesting fish for omega-3, eventually never have to do that anymore, if we just get it from land plants that are producing these oils.
Interesting. So, Doc, you have blessed us with a lot of information today,
Yes.
and yeah, it was all good, and we really appreciate you shedding light on the subject. It's really, really very important. So, we just want to give you an opportunity to share how we can keep in touch with you, like with your social media, your website, any way that we can just keep abreast of all the interesting things that are happening in this field.
Or where to find OmegaQuant.
Yeah, well, OmegaQuant.com, cleverly. That's Omega, then QUANT, like quantity, quantify. It's one word.com. We keep fairly active educational resources going on out that website, a lot of videos and interviews.
It's fantastic. Yeah.
And that's a good place. Social media, I don't have any social media. I don't do it. Sorry. I don't have a Twitter or a, Facebook or any of that stuff.
You're better off, I'm sure.
Yeah, that'll get you in a lot of trouble, Doc.
Yeah. So that's the place to find, I think, what we're doing.
Yeah, it's a fantastic place. So,
Thank you. We worked long and hard to make it useful.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your information. I personally am honored that you're here. So thank you for stopping by.
Stopping by. I appreciate it, Lori. Thank you.
You are so welcome.
Great work, and I'm glad to be part of your team here.
Oh, well, thank you, Dr. Bill.
Yeah, Dr. Bill.
So take care.
Have a great rest of your day.
Yes.
All right, you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.